Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Bienvenue à cette discussion organisée dans le cadre de la 23e édition des RIDM qui se déroule actuellement en ligne jusqu'au 2 décembre. Mon nom est Benjamin Taylor. Je suis le directeur artistique de la série Vision. C'est une série mensuelle ici à Montréal. La discussion qui va suivre portera sur les films Signal 8 et A Bright Summer Diary. A Bright Summer Diary est présenté dans le cadre de la section Confronter l'histoire du 12 au 18 novembre et Signal 8 est présenté du 19 au 25 novembre dans la section Contempler les dystopies. Comme la discussion va se dérouler en anglais, permettez-moi de changer de langue afin de vous introduire nos invités. So it's my great pleasure to be speaking today with Simon Liu, the filmmaker behind Signal 8. Welcome, Simon. As well as Lele, the filmmaker behind A Bright Summer Diary. Welcome, Lei. Thanks for joining us. So before we start the discussion, I wanted to introduce your films very briefly, and I'm just going to read the little paragraphs that you both provided for your own films, just to set them up, kind of how you've put them out into the world, and then we'll take it from there and see what comes of the discussion. So first, Signal 8. This is the description. So Signal 8. They said a storm is calling this way, but they're still waiting. But we're still waiting. Lives carry on in Hong Kong as traces of civic upkeep morph into sites of remembrance. Decorative structures mimic nature, then occasionally malfunction, transforming common spectacle to warning signs. The light urges to tell us something, but can't quite get its point across. Patience tested for another day. And now A Bright Summer Diary. In the summer of 2019, I returned to my hometown, Jiangxi province, and traveled with friends to Lushan Mountain to escape the heat. This trip was the first time in more than 20 years that I had visited Lushan. As a child, my mother and grandparents frequently took me to Lushan during the summer. We would stay there for 2 months at a time. In the mountain, we would look at the scenery, go to the cinema, and enjoy the time in the cooling park.
当时这个照片就是在庐山那个孤岭公园里面立了一块牌子。这个照片上除了我们2个人是真的，其他都是假的，就是画好了一个汽车，画好了一个背景，画在一个好大的这个印刻纸板上，然后我们就站到那个印刻纸板后面。他从正面看就好像我们2个在汽车里面这样照的。
哦。
So this is the first time I've moderated a discussion online and even presented films online. So this is all quite new to me. And I find this really strange doing it without an audience to ask questions, to interact, and to be here with us and with you guys. So I don't know, is that something you guys want to address just straight up? Is this weird elephant in the room at this time with festivals and films and audiences and how things are being received, where you guys are in relation to your work when it's projected this way? So maybe first, Simon, if you have some thoughts, and then we'll go to Lei.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I guess with the situation, I think we're still really fortunate that we're able to present our work to people and to be able to be in discussion, even though there's this distance in between and there's not really much of like a sense of feeling the room. You know, as you kind of alluded to, I think feeling the room intuitively has a lot to do with filmmaking and sharing art in general. But I'm happy that people can be in a comfortable place and still have the opportunity to watch things. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there, and there's a lot of good stuff in this festival. So it's even though like we're not seeing our movies in like a nice theater, you know, it's still something, you know, and I'm appreciative for that.
Yeah.
Great. Lei, how are you feeling?
Yeah, actually, I feel basically I like cinema a lot. I think my film should screen in cinema anyway, and because I am teaching in Karat, we have our own theater, like our own cinema in school. So I miss cinema a lot. But anyway, like on the coronavirus, what can we do? Like if we have this kind of discussion and we could meet audience and audience can enjoy the film and also understand the background, the logic behind the film, that's great for the audience. And thanks to organize this.
Great. So as I mentioned just before we started this discussion, I'm far more used to doing Q&As in person with an audience, and I like asking very vague existential questions to get things going and bring things out in a different way. And one thing I'm always curious about, and it may be a strange question to begin and put you on the spot, when you are making films, do you have an idea of what you are doing, as in like a process, or like why you make films and why you made these particular films, like what the process is behind the actual making? Maybe Lei, if you want to go first.
Or why I make films?
Yeah, why this one? Like maybe as a process, like when you're making these things, what is it for you?
Yeah, basically my working process is not like that kind of industry film like process. Like because I have a studio in Beijing, I continue collecting old photos, archive, books, magazine from secondhand file. So I don't know what I can do with them. Sometimes I do digital cut out. Sometimes I just put everything together, try to make a film happen. So for me, like film is like practice or like ongoing process with the archive. So sometimes when I feel, okay, I have enough material, so I start to do the editing. And also in another way, I think the filmmaking is like a question to myself. How could I do with this kind of materials, or how can I do with memories, or how could I answer the question between memories and the moving image? So yeah, so basically this is the idea why I work with the film. Oh, another thing is, of course, I think filmmaking is like a challenge to myself. Sometimes if I already used to do some kind of artwork, I will try to do something different. Like I did Birthless Animal in 2019. It's a feature film. I did not try to do that before, but I think it's like, I'm very excited to try to do something totally like different themes. Yeah.
Simon.
Oh yeah, I was really interested, and I feel like there's some relationships in this idea of trying to make a cinematic artwork that relates back to memory and relates back to a sense of belonging in place, and kind of a collection of archives and things. Even though my films aren't archival material, I think they're very based on memory. They're extremely based on how specific places and times relate back to a present situation, which I think is a very loaded idea with everything that has transpired in Hong Kong over the past 18, 19 months or so. So I guess Benjamin, you kind of alluded to this idea of like, do you have a sense of what you're doing when you're making a film? Your process of like, kind of this idea of like, do you like having a predetermined idea of what you're doing versus allowing like an intuitive kind of method to guide you along a process? And I think personally, I go through like very polar opposite extremes of the two things. Like I think I'll start off and kind of be feeling things out, and then eventually I'll kind of reach a point where I have very strong feelings about what I'm doing, which throughout the process is often met with like a sudden crash, that falling into a sense of abyss of not quite knowing what I'm doing, or feeling a sense of, not a sense of burden, but a sense of pressure to really represent this place that means so much to me, and this kind of changing people and changing landscape with all of these implications globally happening in the sense, in the case of Hong Kong. And so, yeah, I think I'm, there's lots of ups and downs in terms of my process, but I think one of the things that's most important to me is that I'm always interested in the idea of making films that are based on feelings, that are based on specific, very specific, nuanced feelings. I'm not as interested in making films about specific events or specific events and happenings. I'm much more interested in the feeling that you get based on a way that a place and a people can make you feel. And I hope to kind of allow my work to be a kind of repository or a place for those memories and feelings and ideas and how they relate to the future and of the city and my place and role and belonging in that context.
Great. And then, so yeah, I had you kind of touched on the themes that I like in both your films and kind of what brings them together, and kind of why I chose to co-present them and the things that I'm attracted to them. And yeah, they're both films that are very like strongly connected to a personal place, a personal history, and they use images to connect past and present in different ways and in varying ways. And what I always find interesting about these I guess films as projects and as like a process is how images themselves then start fleeing away into the past, like the films that you've made are now becoming a part of the past. And so I'm always curious as to how you find your interventions on your own past, your own history, how your person as a filmmaker, as an artist, helps or affects the human you who's living your life now. So maybe if you can speak about that, Lei.
Sorry, I don't know how. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Like once you've finished, we'll talk about this film specifically, Bright Summer Diary. Like once it's done, you put it out there in the world. What is it for you in, not as like a filmmaker in a career sort of sense or even a body of work, but as the personal Lei who's like, connected to home or away from home, or like moving through time, and now you've made these images that are now kind of behind you. Where does it help you move yourself as a person?
Okay, I think it's very, very interesting question. Yeah, basically for me, if back to the personally memories or if back to the history, I think that's not very important or biggest topic in the film. So when I work with the film, I think as my generation, we are very far from history. In China, I from history class, we don't know a lot from history from my parents' generation or grandparents' generation. I try to know that. I think this is the part of storytelling in the film, but I think more important thing is I try to use archive and the moving image to rebuild a space for audience, to allow the audience to share the experiments or memories and in the cinema. And also in another way is I think the archive or ready-made image in the film, because of the editing, the meaning of the photos or the meaning of the image already changed. I think that's the most interesting thing for me to challenge myself, also challenge the audience. So yeah, basically I think the film it's like essay film or documentary film, but I think a more important thing is how to look at the image and how to work with the memories and the image. Sorry, I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, well, you asked my second part of the question, which is going to be about putting these personal worlds into the hands of an audience. Yeah. But Simon, maybe if you want to address this sort of the personal impact of the film and your process on your living, and then when it goes into the hands of an audience, what it becomes.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think Lei and I'm from Hong Kong. My dad still lives there, so I go back to visit. Normally go back to go visit once or twice a year. I've been unable to, obviously. And so I I guess I think a few years ago I was very committed to making these like densely layered, very abstract works. This idea of like condensing as much visual information into like a small package as possible, whether that be through like multiple projected performances, like quadruple 60mm projection performances that were layered and used a lot of material defects. So that those kind of works were acting as, again, I'll use the word repository, acting as a form of repository, a kind of repository for this this place that has meant so much to me, with this idea, that hypothetical idea that the works will change, that the place will change in the future. And I was very interested in this idea of kind of condensing a visual cultural identity of Hong Kong into this small package, and to kind of almost replicate the way in which we digest information now. You know, there's like so much information out there that so much visual information, that it's almost impossible to find exactly what you're looking for. So I think as people, we're having to make very distinct judgments on what to focus upon. And so I was using that kind of like visual, like an overstimulated visual language to kind of portray very personal imagery in regard to the way that we process information now in abundance. However, the last 3-4 films I've made have related to a lot of very specific events that have taken place in Hong Kong over the past year and a half. And I've been, you know, Signal 8 was made at a very specific time it was shot in November and December of 2018, and was edited in May 2019, June 2019, as the protest movement started to unfold. And so as I was editing the piece, that's when the movement first started. And so in so many ways, the very images that I'd collected, I would see, and I would be editing on my computer and like look at my phone and see those very places kind of in a sense of, in a state of turmoil and chaos. So that was, you know, in many ways, that was kind of these very personal and intimate images and places, and the kind of memories that I was kind of working with, and an anxiety around those things that was kind of transplanted with global news, you know? So with that, beginning with Signal 8, that was the first film in which I feel as though this idea of a fleeting people, this idea of a fleeting nature of what we know Hong Kong to be, it went from being something that was hypothetical, that was like kind of a hypothetical idea of things changing into the future, to you know, daily kind of developments that are changing the fabric of the city in so many different ways. And so this film is the first of, you know, an ongoing series of films that are kind of dealing with that reality, as opposed to it being something that I'm thinking about for the future. And that kind of has had a big impact on the way that I've thought about the work in so many ways, and has created a sense of urgency to continue to develop and make works as things change so rapidly, so that I'm kind of trying to make films, not quite like a diary, but making a new work every 5-6 months in order to try and keep up with how quickly things are changing. And I feel a sense of responsibility as an artist to do that at this moment.
If you guys have questions or comments for each other, don't hesitate to put your hand up and jump in. Go, Lily.
Yeah, I think I like Simon's like comments on the film. I think it's very interesting between us to work with the film. We both work with the memories, and the very interesting topic I think in the film is the hiding some information, because in A Bright Summer Diary, I try to build up, you know, the mountain behind the cloud. And it looks like they have a lot of political movement behind the cloud, behind the memories, like behind the generation gap we can't touch or we can't feel in. I think that's most interesting or beautiful themes in the film. And also back to Simon's film, because you're talking about people waiting and peaceful, waiting for the storm and waiting for the raining. We understand the political like movement in Hong Kong, even because from the image, it looks like it's very like normal or peaceful, like just like landscape, but we understand just a few months later, you know, what happened in Hong Kong. So I think this kind of handing idea or concept behind the film is quite interesting. And also I think it's very important aesthetic from Asian, you know, like some traditional Asian painting use cloud to hide the mountains. So I wonder if Simon can talk a little bit about that. When you work with the film, how you're feeling the power behind the image, or how you're feeling to hiding the powerful like monster behind the film. Yeah.
Thank you for those comments. I think these are really, really engaging thoughts that, yeah, I'm really struck by kind of what you're talking about. And I'm really interested in this idea of the hidden message, the idea of something that's just lying beneath the surface. And it's like a cloud-like structure, this nebulous form that's kind of creating this shroud behind a sense of ideas. You know, I think that's really fascinating. And I can really see that I feel watching your film, I really feel a sense of broad history, and it's almost like the ideas are just beneath the surface where they're not quite seen, but you can really feel them. You can feel that sense of place, that sense of, and also this idea of wanting to fill in the gaps. I'm really interested in those ideas in your work. History and stories and this lineage of one's past and one's heritage. It's this idea of balancing this idea of the imagination of the past, but then also looking to histories that have been untold and are often shifted to us in so many ways based on the potential for those things to be part of our education and discourse, depending on where we are in the world. And so, yeah, to relate back to Signal 8 as well, I think, I was very interested in kind of taking these things that you would see in daily life in Hong Kong, in this burgeoning metropolis, taking these images of spectacle and kind of seeing how these images and these structures can have this kind of underlying feeling of kind of a violent undertone, something that's an insidious kind of feeling behind something, behind I was kind of saying before that I'm very interested in making films based on feelings. And so the origin of the film, in September of 2018, there was a typhoon that passed through Hong Kong. Hong Kong actually often has very pretty intense typhoons throughout, the late summer period. And so the typhoon was called Typhoon Manghut. And it was the largest recorded typhoon in Hong Kong's history. And so that was on September 17th of 2018, which is my partner's birthday. And so I was at their birthday party. And just a room full of people drinking, hanging out, having normal conversations. And then I look at my phone and I see, and the typhoon was happening as I was at the party. And I see my phone's ringing and I look at my phone and my dad's calling me. And I answer the phone and I was like, hello? I was like, oh shit, the typhoon's happening. I realized that was going on. And then I answered the phone and he's like, Simon, there was this distorted voice coming down the line. And it felt like something was really wrong. It felt like I was halfway across the world in New York, but it felt like something was really happening and I was away from my family. I wasn't there. And through not being there, your mind can wander. The sense of distance, you fill in the gaps, kind of as we were saying before, you fill in the gaps. And then what I felt was what was filled in was this anxiety that something was happening to my father. He started laughing, his window was broken, but he was fine. But that feeling stuck with me, this disjuncture between an inner feeling of anxiety and then looking around the room and seeing everyone just acting normally at a party. And so that kind of really stuck out to me, this idea that of an internal sense of being fraught in the moment, and how that was overlaid visually with everyone acting like everything was normal. And I think that really drove this idea for the film to kind of really show that within this situation, things can change rapidly, that there could be an underlying tone. I was very interested with the fireworks sequence, which is one of the last sequences of the film. Fireworks are a spectacle, something beautiful for us to observe from afar, but they're actually incredibly violent. And also the repeated shots of water, even though those are constructed water fixtures, they're man-made, they're made to be controlled. At any point, I keep thinking to myself, what if it were to overflow? What if these things that we depend on to function for day-to-day life, they started to malfunction and not work. And I think this is something that I've kind of really became even more apparent to me since COVID started. You know, this idea that like, we think we have these systems in place. We think we have these things that are gonna protect the way that the things function day to day. And as I think we've learned across the world, or particularly in the country that I'm in at the moment, there's a very thin layer between things being in control and falling apart. And that's a line that I think I'm very interested in kind of working around.
Really?
Sorry, I think it's very interesting because when I watch Simon's film, it's very peaceful and looks like quiet, but when Simon talking, it's full of energy. I think it's quite interesting. And another thing is I feel quite interesting is Simon talking about some background story and your relationship with your family and the relationship in Hong Kong with people, and also the background of course, the weather and the background of the history. I think it's quite, of course, it's an interesting topic to discuss here. It's about how to make a bigger like space in the film to allow audience to come to join us. Because like in my film, I try to just use one photographer from my family and another photographer or movie image in the film. It's not from my family, but I still would like to talk about the story in my family. I just try to start from one point, but also like Simon's film, like link to the relationship between family members, the history, the political background, blah, 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 everything. And another themes I would like to mention is, you know, they have a very famous like documentary film from Warda, the Ulysses. It's also like from one photographer, but linked to different interview, different personally history and political background, and of course, like myths or storytelling from kids. So I think this is quite interesting from experimental film. So we are not trying to only tell one story or try to push, you know, to push like one concept or idea to audience. Like in the cinema, we are not like the leader to only allow you to understand the image in this way, not in that way. Instead of that, I think we just try to bring the audience and welcome everyone to Simon's birthday party, like to feel what they like, to enjoy the time and pick up what they want to drink, maybe a piece of cake or I don't know, some 点心, some delicious things to eat. So I think this kind of freedom is very important I think both in us film. I don't know if you would like to have some comments.
Yeah, I actually have a subject connected to like everything that you guys are talking about. And so maybe just for a bit of context, RIDM is like more broadly a documentary festival, but including a pretty broad spectrum of what that can cover. Your guys' films are in the programming, so they definitely have like an interesting mix. And then Visions, the series that I program, I'm generally more interested in artists that are considering the form of their works and like the media and how this sort of affects looking at the world. And you've both touched on this idea of there being like a cloud or like a veil or even like a big hole in the image, and the film's really working around this. And I'm pretty interested in medium, like Simon, you're working mostly on 16, a lot of in-camera editing. Lele with found footage, and you have very specific media that you've both chosen. And I don't really want to get too technical about it, but maybe if you could each say something about how exploring either a particular medium or using that medium to explore the hole that you're kind of like dancing around, or the fog that you're walking through, why in these particular films either you chose the medium or why the film came out of the medium. Maybe Lele can go first, yeah.
Oh, really? Okay, I already talked a little bit. So yeah, why I use found footage, I think it starts from like question. It's like why we make film or why we make new image in the daily life like today. So because right now, every day we got moving image videos from the YouTube, you know, like from the everywhere television, like website. There are so many videos and new medium, how to say, new videos for us, new moving image for us. So I feel that's too much for my life. So I just question myself what is value for artists to make a new moving image work. So then I try to use found footage or ready-made image and use my technique to editing them together and build a new relationship between the sound and image and try to bring new meaning for the ready-made pictures. So maybe when audience in the cinema, when they check the pictures in the film, it have a different meaning from the picture. And this meaning or this idea is totally different from the original. And also this meaning because of a filmmaker and also because of the audience. The audience bring the memories and bring their own experiments to the cinema and they understand the film differently. So I think this is the value from the filmmaker and this is most beautiful things in the cinema because like everyone in the cinema, they sit together, but different people have different understanding from the film. That's most interesting for me. So that's why I would like to use found footage. Like in this film, I brought some of them. Also, yeah, in my feature film, Birthless Animal, I tell my family story, but I use, you know, like official documentary, found footage, and black and white photos. They're not from my family, but I try to bring new meaning to them. Yeah, that's why I work with found footage.
Great. And Simon, so you in your process and your chosen medium.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask Lele something afterwards. So if you don't mind, I'll talk about my medium and then I'll revert back to questions for him. So yeah, I work with 16 millimeter film primarily, and I've kind of worked with it in different ways over the years. Before, I was very interested, as I kind of alluded to before, as using this medium that's kind of associated with antiquity, that's associated with the past. You know, film is this idea of like classic film, this idea of like something that is of the past. I'm interested in using it in a way that has more contemporary ideas. So that's why I was kind of like using film and exposing the same role repeatedly again and again and again in order to create like an image that has like a digital like density. You know, that's kind of how I was working with film before. And then it was Jerome Heiler. He's a wonderful San Francisco experimental filmmaker. I've been making films with his partner Nathaniel Dorsky for decades now. I went to a Q&A that he did, and he was basically saying that he would they made these films in like the 70s together when they were living in some house in New Jersey. And he was like, you know, like there's so many layers in the film. It's so abstract that like, I wish I had just filmed things normally. I wish I had just filmed life as it was. So I have that as a document. At the time, they were interested in these material qualities of the work. They were interested in making dynamic images that excited them. But then looking back at the work, you know, 40 years later, he was like, I just wish I had more of a document of the time. And so hearing that, I was like, oh shit, like I don't want to feel the same way. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, I better like try and switch up my game a little bit to try and to have that document for myself, to have these images of Hong Kong unadulterated, well, relatively unadulterated. And so I also work with a lot of like very kind of improvisational techniques. I use a Bolex primarily, a 16 millimeter Bolex, which I kind of have like a very, I kind of like to think about it as like an instrument in so many ways. I'm working with, as you alluded to, Benjamin, a lot of in-camera editing, a lot of single frame editing, a lot of just like kind of whipping the camera around and being spontaneous, like changing frame rates as the film is rolling. And so using a lot of like kind of like disjunctures in the way that the image is shown to you as a way to kind of implant a sense of internal feelings on an otherwise objective image. I'm very interested in kind of bestowing very specific kind of internal movements onto an image, and that's kind of my real motive. And also, I'm very interested in this idea of like having a time lapse, not a time lapse, but having like a lapse in time between filming something and then seeing it. So like, you know, I'm like doing things in a very like haphazard kind of way. I try and be like a little bit rough with the way that I film things, and be open to making mistakes. And so whenever I get film back later on, yeah, it's always exciting, and it's always like, oh shit, like, did this turn out? Did this not turn out? And so that's something I was really attracted to in using film, this kind of anxiety and nervousness that kind of, you know, it's kind of what you were talking about before, like these ups and downs of the way in which you approach things. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of a big part of my approach in using 16mm film. But to relate back to what you were talking about, like your use of found footage, I think it's really interesting that you're kind of saying that like there's already so many images out there in the world that like, why should I add more to them? I think that's actually a really interesting idea. And I you know, I've seen The Brighter Summer's Day, and then I've also seen another film that you made that has all the furniture catalogs.
Yeah, I think that's Birthless Animal.
Yeah. Wait, how long? But that wasn't the feature though, right? It was like,
that's feature. Yeah, that's feature film.
It was had a magazine clippings in them and stuff.
Maybe I have another like short film is also made by Furniture Catalog. Yeah. Maybe you that one. Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of thinking, I was very interested in what you said before, and that like in A Brighter Summer's Day, there are family photographs, but you're also combining found photographs as well, and also this very intimate story that's being told. And I'm kind of interested in this idea of like filling in the gaps, like the potential idea of things being fictional, the idea of you reappropriating images that aren't of your family, but then putting them in a place where they become part of your family lexicon and heritage. And I'm interested in this idea of like trying to, as I think I like, and your approach in filling in the gaps of history, especially during the time period in which you're working with, you know, there's like maybe a limited amount of documents, visual documents, written documents of what life was really like at that time. So my question to you and somebody is like, kind of like, yeah, what's your kind of thought process behind your approach in filling in these gaps, and like your kind of feelings around that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I feel like I always try to find answer to this question, but looks like I can't find right answer to that. Yeah, the gap is there. I can't feel it, and yeah, I just what I can do just honest and trust the gap. It's like in A Bright Summer Day and also in Birthless Animal, I sometimes when I do the interview, I just cut down the answer from my family members. When I interview when my mother want to try to tell some history, I just cut down and editing that. So I think this is very interesting themes. Like in my generation, some of young people, they don't want to listen to the history. They are looking forward and they try to live in the modern life. To be honest, I just to allow this happen. I can't feel it. Another thing is in the film, if I'm talking about family history, I think it's very hard to make that really happen in the cinema, because sometimes the audience will boring about you're always talking about your family or your personally understanding of history. I think it's it's too narrow or limited audience imagination. So when I work with my found footage, I just try to open the opportunity to audience. They could understand by themselves. That's why I put furniture catalog and different material there, because I watch too much film about personally like experiments in the daily life, but I also have my story, why I sit there and listen to your story. So yeah, I always bring this kind of question to myself then and make film. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I have a question. I guess it kind of relates in that in the work that I present and then what I'm co-presenting here, I really love like the short form in festivals and as a programmer and even as a filmmaker, where you can have these little units that then kind of go out into the world and like bump up against other people's lives, other people's stories, and then also you both have like sort of like a foot in the art world and like exhibitions and performances, and so these images don't function in just one way. So I'm curious if, well, I don't know if you necessarily plot out what happens to these works, but if you do, if you have any ideas about that, how your works kind of interact with other works and different spaces, different times, or if you've had experiences of these works being shown and like having them refracted back to you or to an audience in a different way because of the sort of the size and the shape that they are. Go, Simon.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting question. I mean, I think when a work is shown like on loop on an installation, there is like more of an opportunity. I like the idea of it's like something happening without necessarily anyone being there. You know, I think that's a really, as I was kind of like I was primarily working on these multiple 60mm multiple projector performances for so long. And there was this real sense of like, oh shit, I'm gonna work like super hard to like get all these projectors here and to have all of these different reels playing. And then it's gonna be over in 20 minutes and I'll do it again in 6 months. So there was some kind of like pressure on the moment that I was really excited about with that. And then when it comes to like the idea of installation, this idea of something, you know, having a longer life as well. But I'm also very interested, especially now, kind of what Lele was talking about, this idea of like just loving the cinema and loving things being big and like loud. And then the pressure and this feeling of just like, it's happening, you know, like, and it's like it's like this this feeling that you want to like retain the information, you want to like savor that moment, you know. And yeah, I mean, I really miss that about the cinema. I miss yeah, like the whole ritual of just like of it being a fleeting thing, something that's being transitory. So yeah, and I also really enjoy kind of seeing and what you alluded to, Benjamin, this idea of like the short film program and how, you know, there's the potential for you to see connections between each other's work or to have the opportunity to have a discussion with y'all on Zoom, you know, and just kind of talk about like, you know, me and Lele and I have never met before in IRL, but, you know, I feel like there are like some like relationships between what we're doing, and it's like, you know, it's interesting to go from, and I'm sure you can relate to this, kind of working in a very solitary way and working by yourself and then putting it out there in the world and having other people seeing it and realizing that like other people can understand and can relate to what you're thinking about, things that are very private to you. I think that's a magical thing too. But yeah.
Really?
About A Bright Summer Diary, I think is for this visual, I think this is just special for the cinema, for my understanding is because I also work with the music and the sound design in this film. So I think it's totally makes sense in the cinema, but I also do exhibition. Like I have a solo exhibition in Arles Photographer Festival, like 1 year before, last summer, 2019 in France. So I built up a cinema in Photographer Festival, and I'm trying to move a Romance in Lausanne cinema to France. But in the cinema, I only have I just delete the voiceover and the dialogue in the film. I try to make the film more abstract. So the audience can come to the Photographer Festival, but they watch the film. They really sit down and watch the film. So that's how I love cinema, you know. I hope the whole world go back to normal and we can go back to the cinema and enjoy the film together. I hope we can do that next edition of this festival of Montreal International Documentary Festival. Yeah,
that'd be great. As soon as you can, come to Montreal.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, definitely will.
Do you guys have any other questions related to the films for you guys? But I have one last question, which might take some time. But do you have anything for each other?
Yeah, I don't have questions. I just want to give a comments to Simon. It's like I also love to learn how to work with 60 meters. You know, I'm working in car arts, and a lot of filmmakers from car arts work with the like you said like classical way to work with film. But when I just start to work with that, coronavirus coming and we block down, so we can't do anything. And also I discussed with another Hong Kong artist, Wang Ping. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah, well, Wang Ping's my buddy, dude. That's what I was gonna say, actually. Yeah, because we were at Sundance together, and then he went to your class at Cal Arts a few days later. Yeah.
We have a very nice meeting in Cal Arts, and we drink together and we talk whole day. So and we also discuss how to use 16mm together, or we can learn the knowledge for each other.
He came to New York, and I took him to buy a Bolex, and then I taught him how to film stuff. That was me. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The other coincidence is actually we were in Rotterdam together, but we didn't meet. So like, yeah, that was like the last bastion of a trip where like, yeah, I like think about like that a lot. You know, it's like, oh, this is like, yeah. The last festival we were at before the fucking world shut down. Yeah. But yeah. I think yeah, we'll talk. I think you could. I think texturally, the kind of way that you're working, I think you could do some really, really interesting things with 16mm. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that would be worthwhile, like something that I would love to see you pursue as well. I think you could do some really magical things with it.
Yeah, sorry, we're chatting some personally.
I know, yeah.
No,
it's like it's over.
It brings me to my last question. In that, yeah, again, these are kind of like different circumstances. People will be watching your films online in the context of this festival. Then they can watch this discussion if they so wish. Then, so I was wondering for you guys, like what's next project-wise, and if people are interested to see other of your works, like where can they see them? But I'm more interested to see where things are going next. So maybe Leila, you can go first.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I might believe I believe in cinema. So I hope if I can show my next work, it should be in cinema. And to be honest, like right now in Beijing, we already could allow people to go to the cinema. So this Friday, I was screening my feature film in Beijing, but it's not quite public. Just I found a cinema like can screen in DCP. So I think the cinema is the best place to screen in the film, of course. But on the coronavirus, I totally understand a lot of festivals move to online to continue, like keep a relationship with audience, to link with audience. Like right now we have Q&A based on Zoom meeting. We understand it's not good as have a beer together or hug each other face to face, but we can do this. It make us understand we are together. We believe back to the cinema, and we believe we have energy in the cinema in the future. So yeah, thanks for this question. Sorry, thanks for the festival have this kind of Q&A section here, and keep the audience understand filmmakers, and keep audience love films, love cinema forever. Yeah.
Simon.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel the same way, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the day when things are returning to a certain degree. So I'm for future projects since Signal 8, I finished 2 short films. One of them is called Happy Valley, and that is about to premiere at 2 different festivals coming up soon. And I just finished another new film called Force, which just premiered at the New York Film Festival. And so that's actually my first foray into digital animation. It's a collaboration with my sister, Jenny Mary Tai Liu, and it kind of combines 16mm footage with very jittery digital animation. So it was really exciting for me to work in that way, because I was being very kind of a relative purist in terms of using the 16mm format unadulterated. So this film, I tried to kind of have a more collage kind of relationship to things, and try to use a lot of graphics and a lot of After Effects. It was like a new exciting experience, which I really enjoyed. And now I'm working on a 6-channel video installation of that is kind of follows the train of thought of Signal 8 and Happy Valley, which is like the sister film to Signal 8. And so yeah, I'm working on a 6-channel video installation. It's my first larger scale video installation work, which I'm really excited to do, and that's going to show in a museum in New York in June. And then I'm working on my first feature film, which is actually like all my works that have really been shown on the festival circuit, except for maybe one, are about Hong Kong. And so this first feature film is actually about my mom's family in England. So I'm half English, half Hong Kong Chinese. And so this is actually about a region in England called Stoke-on-Trent. And so there's a lot of very strange histories about the area. And so it's about 13,000 year, 1,300 year old Anglo-Saxon treasure, Brexit voters, and pottery. So yeah, it's a different kind of work. So I'm excited to kind of do that. So yeah, we'll see. And so Lele, are you working on any new projects at the moment?
Yeah, I'm also working for my second feature film right now. So we are very happy we got some funding from Rotterdam Film Festival. So we are continue work with them.
Did you get the Hubert Bells?
Yes, yes.
Oh, congratulations. That's amazing. That's great. Yeah, good for you. That's awesome.
But the bad thing is I can't travel into Europe and I can't do the final mix. So right now we'll work together with the editor and the musician together online. So it takes a lot of time. Yeah.
You got it though. It'll be great, I'm sure. Yeah, but it's a new experience, right? It's all a learning experience, you know, this whole thing. Totally. Be stronger in the future, you know?
It will be done.
It will be done.
Yeah.
Great, guys. Thanks very much for joining us, for sharing the films through RIDM. And then, yeah, I guess if people are watching this, they can go and watch a film online. Or if they already have watched it, they can check out some other great things. And just as a reminder, yeah, to the audience, that the films are available on the platform enligne.rdm.ca. So that's enligne.rdm.ca. Oui, pour un rappel pour le public, les films sont disponibles sur notre plateforme enligne.rdm.ca. Merci encore et bon festival. Thanks very much, guys. Have a good festival.